So am I happy with Brexit? Yes, of course I am. I'm very relieved it's going ahead. I was excited by the yes vote. I was surprised, to be very honest. I thought it wasn't going to go that way. And for me, it went ahead for one big reason, and that was the notion that we had the opportunity to effectively regain our sovereignty and regain control of our borders. For me, that was what tipped the balance. And living here in Switzerland, obviously the Swiss are very happy on the edge of Europe. They're not full-fledged members of the European Union, and they prosper on the outskirts, but they're also fiercely protective of their independence, and they have a system that works for them. It's built on tolerance as well. They have four official languages and different cultures which exist in harmony, and that's something I think to be admired and respected, and there's no reason we can't also aspire to that in the UK. After all, we've had decades, if not centuries, of immigration and influence from around the world, all built on the back of the quest for international trade, something which I think we can be proud of as being British. We're open-hearted, generally tolerant compared to many nations. And one thing's for sure, we absolutely relish the diversity that comes with trading with other people and sometimes welcoming other people to find a home for themselves and a prosperous livelihood in the UK. It's what's made Britain British. It's a sort of an intangible, dynamic definition, something which changes and something evolves. And being British, I think, delivers constantly fantastic things in the world, from innovation and ideas through to the people themselves, and of course through soccer, cultural events as well. But fundamentally, that balance of migration, so net migration, the number of people leaving the shores like myself, minus those who are actually coming to the UK, has meant that the balance has shifted. And what's happened was, over the course of the last century, we were seeing net migration at figures which I think the UK was very comfortable with. However, what happened when we joined the European Union, we thought we were joining a free trading club, something which was totally overlapping with everything that the UK believes in. After all, why not? We're experts at that. But the EEC turned into the European Union, and the vision of the European Union changed to become something which was dominated by this vision of economic and political union. And that's something which was at odds to most people's hearts in the UK. And especially when, in the turn of the century, so 2002, 2003, treaties such as the Maastricht Treaty meant that political union was accelerating, and also the membership of the European was also growing extremely quickly. So you had it growing from 10, 15 nations to over 25 nations, with other nations from the periphery of Europe being welcomed in, and rightly so, on the basis of free trade. However, that also meant Brussels was taking too much power, and it meant that we didn't have control of our borders. So of course we had this effect just after the crisis of 2008, when a lot of nations were basically opening their doors, where nations were seeing that they could become part of the European Union, and it basically led to an avalanche of immigration. So figures rising from 50 to 100,000 to well over 200,000 in net migration, and you had cities the size of Oxfordshire basically being created year after year in the UK. And obviously on the back of the crisis of 2008, there was tremendous pressure on local services. So for decades and decades, people have been very content with welcoming all sorts of nationalities to the shores, safe in the knowledge that this is the sort of thing which benefits a nation. But suddenly when you have these sort of numbers and you have a government which is under pressure because of the financial crisis and trying to get ourselves out of that, it means that the pressure on school places, on hospitals and doctors, surgeries, and fundamentally even on housing, it's something that I think up and down the country, different villages and towns were basically seeing this and being overwhelmed, and there was a sense that it was getting out of control. And when it's out of control and you want to do something about it, but then you have the huge power in Brussels which is effectively saying, no, there's nothing you can do. And if we're proud of the fact that we offer free education, that those in need get help to get back on the social, have social services, and anybody who speaks a little bit of English are going to find obviously the shores of Britain a great place to go, even probably ahead of other countries. And so I think Britain was disproportionately affected by what was the trend after about 2010, immigration getting out of control. And for all of those reasons, the risk is that you had cultures and communities being swamped, and what it was to be British actually being overrun. And this is, I think, what chimed and what resonated in many people's hearts, so much so that the choice to leave, it meant if there was a cost to be paid for regaining control, it was a small price worth paying. Although, on the other hand, even taking back control meant also being in control of embracing treaties potentially from around the world. So it's a fact that the European Union has basically been an economic disaster for many countries. It's created an artificially low Deutschmark for Germany, and so that's benefited, and the interest rates benefit Germany at super high cost for some of the southern countries, so Portugal, Greece, even Italy as well, and Spain, where youth unemployment running at over 50%. So economically, it's been a very difficult place to be for many, many people. And so for those who were seeking a better place to be and an easy place to land, UK was an obvious choice. However, we just couldn't do that, because obviously if you're part of the economic, the free trade agreement of the European Union, you have to accept other pillars as well, and that meant no control in terms of net migration. So I'm happy that's going ahead. I think it's important for the future of Britain and what it means to be British, to be ruled and to have basically the courts in the UK having the last say on things. I think there is an upside potential. I think it won't happen overnight, but I think embracing the faster growing nations of the world, like India, like China, even the US actually, as we see happening now, there is a huge potential win long term for the UK, instead of being locked into the European Union. And I just couldn't imagine trying to negotiate with the European Union when you're another country, basically having to please all the different countries. And now UK can single-mindedly negotiate new trade agreements with different countries so that it benefits the people of the UK as well. So I'm optimistic. I'm happy with the way things are. But I think people need to remember that the key overriding reason this happened was caused by the European Union in terms of going for a political solution. And I think David Cameron, a lot of people think he has a lot to answer for. I think he misjudged the mood of the European Union. And when he called the election, I think he believed that he could go and negotiate some compromises and some new solutions which would ameliorate certainly those in his party who are agitating consistently. But actually all that demonstrated, and he huffed and he puffed and he tried his damnedest to get the best sort of compromise and best agreements. He couldn't give anything, because the European Union, they have their head in the ground, they're full of unelected, unaccountable politicians, and I think Cameron probably was as surprised as anybody, and of course the nation saw through that. Fortunately, we're beginning to see the intransigence of Brussels in negotiation again, given that a good Brexit could be good for everybody, but they're refusing to negotiate beyond cash, effectively. So very happy to be leaving. That's the key reason why I think it's good for us, effectively long-term, to protect what it is to be British. And just a final remark, even my children, I have older children, so 17 and 19, I actually have a younger one as well, but certainly the 17-year-old quotes some of his teachers from school quite rightly, reporting that it's the older generation generally who voted to leave as opposed to the younger generation. And ironically, because of course that's going to have an impact on his choices in the future. But I need to remind him that actually perhaps the older generation, first of all, they understand the arguments I just laid out about what it means to be British, and it's not a racist position to try to protect what it is to be British. And the fact that we can continue to welcome migration at the right level in the future. And also that we do, as we're older, begin to become a little bit skeptical about some of the so-called experts, the academics in the world. Because he also said it's not just the young, it's the smart, intelligent, intelligentsia who voted to remain. I just don't go along with that. We had groups like the IMF and the Institute for Fiscal Studies, all the experts poring over their reports, basically suggesting that a vote to leave was going to be a catastrophe for the UK. Basically, the four horses of the apocalypse were going to arrive overnight after we'd voted, and companies would be leaving, and the future would be dim, and that just hasn't happened, of course. So actually, I think being older, potentially wiser, is a good thing, and they'll get their chance maybe to rejoin if they really, really want to, maybe in 10, 20 years' time. But for now, it's a good thing.